Well, here we have it. Engine out of the car. Now we need to go through, swap everything over, and put the new one in. It's pretty much that simple, that cut and dry. So we'll find out what we need to switch over from our new to our old, or from our old to our new. I know we had gasket sets and everything. We'll do that. Put this bad boy back in here and drive it away. Let's start the conversation here at the transmission. There's no better time to replace the throwout bearing, which as you can see is also the clutch slave cylinder on this vehicle. It's not leaking. All that black stuff you see in there is just clutch dust. I mean, that's just what happens as the clutch wears. I am replacing the clutch. I do have a slave cylinder slash throwout bearing. I've recommended that they replace it, but they may need the money for the radiator as well as some ignition wires and some other things. So we're going to leave it up to the owners to decide if they wish to replace that or not. I can't say that it's leaking. It's also not making any noise. So it's a tough call. We'll leave that up to the people that own the truck. Here's our new engine. It's a long block, which means it has a cylinder head and pistons that are all remanufactured. Comes with a gasket kit and what I believe to be a water pump right there. But that's what they look like, all shiny and new. And we have to swap, well, looks like about absolutely everything over. And to top it all off, that's a cast iron block, which means it's heavy, which means we won't be able to just lift it out of that box. We're gonna have to chain it up, swap over the stuff that we need to swap over to switch it onto the engine hoist. So anything we take off, we'll just put on the ground to start with, and then we'll come back and lift this thing up and swap everything over from there. I think I'll start my disassembly here by getting this stud out and just taking care of that. So now that it's out here, we can get to it much easier. There we go. One smoking fastener. So much easier to do when it's out of the truck, don't you think? Now that I've removed that stubborn fastener, the plan is to get all the accessories and everything off of this as much as I possibly can while it's up in the air like this. So I'll remove the clutch, I'll remove the flywheel, I'll also take the locating pins out of the back here. That may prove challenging, but we'll see what we can do with that. But just remove as much stuff as I can. The exhaust manifold and this bracket. I can't remove that rear bracket, the dipstick. And set that stuff aside. And then I'm gonna move over to the other side and do the same thing and leave this front bezel and everything for last. And it looks like the water pump also. So that's the plan. It's really just a question of taking off the old and getting ready for the new. Going to take this whole exhaust manifold off as this assembly. But first, some penetrating oil. Really glad to see that these are bringing the studs, because that means I won't have to remove the studs. That's because I already saw that on the new engine it doesn't have any studs. So they were kind enough to make it so that I had to take the ARR system off no matter what. Thank you. These are all 10 millimeter. The ones that are holding the exhaust manifold on were 13. This one here is 15. I guess that one had to be different. We'll have to remember that when we go to install that on the new engine. It's the last fastener, so we better hold it. Now that I've got the exhaust manifold removed, I have the opportunity to work with it on the bench. I don't want to run into this issue again. Eventually, you may have to replace a clutch in this, something, and the exhaust will have to come off again. I am a little disappointed in Chevrolet for not putting studs with nuts like everybody else does. That I think would have been a much better way of fastening it, because what happens with these is they will pretty much rust into place, and once they do, well, you saw what happened. To try and prevent that, or just make things easier going together, I'm going to run a tap through this hole. I checked this fastener, and this one's a little cheesed up. So I actually found 3 fasteners that are of the same thread pitch. This is a 10 by 1.5. So I've got a tap here that's a 10 by 1.5, and I'm going to run it through each one of these holes. Technically, I should be using what's called a thread chaser for this. I should not use a tap in this manner, technically speaking. However, I don't have a thread chaser. A thread chaser is a little bit different. It's not as aggressive, and it's designed to clean threads. A tap is designed to tap a hole. So technically what I'm doing is not the right thing, but if you don't have anything else, I'd say a tap is better than nothing. And you want to make sure that you catch the threads properly, because if you don't, you could be in a world of hurt. But once you've got them caught, something that was mentioned to me the last time I did a video when I was tapping something is to back it out like this, back and forth, instead of just running it in. It's a valid point. And we cleaned out some of the gunk. And with our new fasteners, it should just go in very easily. Probably should hit this with a little brake clean or something. Clean it out the rest of the way. A bit of oil. And we'll just do this with all 3 holes. Now all this work is going to pay off when we go to put the exhaust bolts back in, and they just go right in. We won't have to fight with them or anything. In many ways, the hard parts of our operation are over. We've already gotten over most of the hurdles. Now it's just a matter of switching things over and reinstalling that engine. Those all went in with ease, and I'm happy for that. That way I don't have to concern myself with having to deal with these cheesed up fasteners. So we'll just throw these away. We'll use these new ones when we go to and reinstall it and put it back together and move on with our lives. And there's one more thing I want to do while I've got this here, and that is clean these gasket surfaces, because I'm going to have to put new ones on. I believe that I have new ones inside the gasket kit. In fact, before I clean these up, like these graphite gaskets, a lot of times you can reuse them and get away with it. This is on the top of the engine, so even if it leaks, it's not going to be that difficult to get to. But it's probably a good idea to wait and see if I have these gaskets before I go and clean this all up. Okay, one last thing on this exhaust manifold before I put it away and get going on the engine again. Check it for cracks. Cast iron can crack from time to time. Actually, Fords are known for that. But I'm not seeing any cracks here. If you're wondering why it's designed like this, it's for that AIR system. It adds air to the exhaust to help get rid of any unburned fuel. So that's the reason why it's designed like that. But look around for any cracks. This is just a casting mark. If you don't see any cracks, you're good. And if you do see a crack, a lot of times you'll see a little bit of soot around the outside of it, indicating an exhaust leak. But I'm not seeing that, so we can reuse this just fine. These are 13s, I believe. But we'll also have to clean up this gasket. For stuff like this, getting it off the bench grinder is going to be easy. I don't have to worry about this surface because it's new on the new engine. I suppose if nothing else, we can take this water pump pulley off. These are 13s. We don't even have to take this off if we got a new one. Oh yes we do. We'll need the fasteners. Now I'm going to leave this one in here for now, because I know I've got to put something back in there when I go over to do the finishing touches on the new block. I'm gonna go over the old one for anything that's like this that I can switch over. But for now, we've got the fasteners out of the water pump. I believe you've got a new water pump, so I'm just gonna put these with the pulley. Well, most of them with the pulley. Okay, how about we deal with our crank bolt that somebody left in here. Let's also do the timing cover. Looks like we've got a couple that go in up underneath here. These are all 8mm. And as I said, there's two that come in up underneath here that are actually 10mm. These all appear to be the same length. Knowing that there's studs coming down through here and that we're gonna have to take the oil pan off anyway, I'm gonna wait until I get the oil pan off to really try to get this off of here. There's no point in fighting with it if it's gonna be easier if I just take the oil pan off. It looks like somebody sealed an oil leak by taking RTV and slapping it on the front of it. Thanks for giving me extra stuff to clean up. Why don't we get that clutch and flywheel off? I'm gonna remove the pressure plate here. Normally, I would not be using a chrome socket on my impact, but there really isn't enough clearance between the pressure plate and the fastener in order to get an impact socket in there. So yell at me if you will. I am wearing the safety glasses, so if one of the things that chrome can do is shatter, or it's got like little pieces of metal that might come flying off of here, little pieces of the chrome when you do this. So this is not recommended, but this is what I'm doing to get this done. This socket is a 9/16, by the way. I did see where it went. Check it out. Not a whole lot of wear. I mean, it's worn, but Ryan knew how to drive a stick. He wasn't burning his clutch up. This looks like normal wear to me. So he wasn't riding his clutch or anything like that. Ryan knew what he was doing. Miss you, buddy. Okay, you may want to have your flywheel machine. That's not a bad thing. I am just gonna clean this flywheel up. I've done it before with great success, and I'm gonna do it here. First, I'll get off some of the big chunks. All right, I'm gonna be happy with that. You see some of this area in here, you might be concerned. I am not. A few 100 miles after you install a clutch, it's gonna look like that again anyway. I'm gonna be completely content with installing a new clutch onto that surface. Now I have noticed that these fasteners are kind of a weird size. The closest thing I could find was 17, but a 17 fits kind of sloppy. It's still gonna come out, but it's sloppy. Be ready, these are heavy. And also, be careful of this edge. I've gotten the snot cut out of me off of one of these things once, just from holding it like this. Watch out for sharp metal objects. It's like our new block doesn't come, well, our new cylinder head does not come with this little plate right here. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not really sure what this is for. Maybe an EGR? Couldn't say for sure though. Somebody out there knows. Leave it in the comments. I'm just gonna keep prepping stuff as I go. This will make reassembly that much easier. We've worked our way over around to this side. I'm gonna start at the bottom and work my way up, but before I lower this engine down, I'm gonna take the oil pan off, but I'm gonna wait till the last possible minute to do that because I know that that's gonna start dripping all over my floor. But I think I'll start with my ignition system. Got our purge solenoid to go first. Knowing that this one up here had the stud in it, I'm just gonna, when I put it down, I'm gonna leave that stud in place. When you're doing a job like this, there's a lot of fasteners. It's easy to forget where stuff goes. Let's try this engine mount. It's like we got two 15s and that 13/16s up here. Same deal. Leave that fastener in place so I remember where it goes. Looks like we got some sensors here and another stud. Also looks like a 13/16s. So I'm just gonna run that back in like this by hand And that way it'll be there and ready when I need it. Same as this one. But these others, it's like we need an 8 and a 10. Crank sensor, fun to remove, but we got it out. This one's an 8mm. This is the cam sensor. The camshaft runs right through here. I forgot this is a pushrod engine. Another 10mm for this distributor cap looking thing. You know what that is? It drives the oil pump. So back in the day when this had a distributor, this right here went down on the oil pump drive and drove the oil pump. Now they just have sort of a dummy shaft because the camshaft is down in here and it turns this, which would have turned the distributor, but now it just turns the oil pump. Oil pressure sending unit, I'm guessing that's going to be 1 1/16". This right here is probably the knock sensor. This knock sensor, it's like a 22mm. It's basically there to sense vibration. Yep, see, it just threads into the block, goes nowhere. It's kind of a blind hole. So that'd be your knock sensor. Be real careful with this. Oil pressure sending unit, I don't have my 1 1/16" with me, so I'm gonna use a 27mm. There you go. I'm gonna go clean the threads up on this. It looks like it's got some kind of sealer on it. Do the knock sensor too while I'm here. Not that it matters, it's just gonna make the threads go in easier. I'm gonna remove this intake manifold. Like I said, I don't remember where that guy went. I think he held something on, like a bracket or something like that. But we just got some of these fasteners in here for the intake manifold. Might need to remove these for the fuel rail. Not real sure. But once I get the intake manifold off, pretty much it's the oil pan, valve cover, and this front piece here. I don't even know what to call that, but we'll have to do that while it's on the ground. These are 13mm. All the same length, by the way. It's like it comes off as an assembly, but we got a connector that's hooked up here. Here's our connector. It's into this fastener on the valve cover. Rather than fighting with it, I'm just gonna pull this connector out of its little mount here. That wasn't that hard. There is our intake manifold. Gotta love plastic intake manifolds, don't you? Okay, we've run into one of our first issues, and that's that we've got these 2 studs here that we need to take off and put on the other engine. So how are we gonna get these studs out? Well, there's kind of one of 2 ways. One, there's a special socket set that you can use that removes studs. Probably the easiest way to do it. Or you can use the 2-nut method. I'm going to take 2 of the existing nuts that I already have from removing some of the other components. I'm going to take one and put it on backwards. So I'm going to put it on like this, facing this way. Thread it down about there. Then I'm going to take the other nut and thread it over the top the normal way. And since these are 13mm, I'm going to take 2 13mm and I'm going to tighten those nuts together like so. And now I'm going to take the back nut and start twisting it this way. And that loosens it right up, takes it right out. And I just removed the stud. I'm going to leave this on. I'm going to take it over to the block and the new one. I'm going to insert it. 1, so that I know where it goes, but 2, so that I don't have to go through all this all over again, because this is how you get them on. Here we are at our new block. It was this rear one. Just need to run them down snug. And just the opposite, just take the outer nut off. In this case, looks like they're both going to come together. We're going to repeat for the other stud. I just noticed something that concerns me very much. This is where the oil filter housing is on this block, and you'll notice the configuration that we have there. You'll notice a very different configuration here. There's just the oil filter. It screws directly onto the block. This is perplexing. I don't know if I can convert this over to that, or if that has some kind of external cooler on it or something. Not real sure. Either way, we've got to get the oil pan off and that front timing chain cover off. We'll start with the oil pan. I believe these are all 10 millimeter. Here's my gasket scraper. Want to see the damage? No, you do. Before we do that, let's get this timing cover off. Before we get into that, I am happy to report that the new block has these pegs on it, both in the front and the back here. So I'm very happy not to have to deal with that. But let's see. What have we got here? We've got an engine that's seized up. Oh, I don't know. It's like we'll have to pop a couple bearing caps to find out if they're smoked, but I've seen much worse. I've shown you much worse. I'm not feeling like a whole lot of junk here. We're gonna have to swap our pickup tube over, because I'm sure the new one doesn't come with an oil pump or a pickup tube. We're committed now though. We're putting an engine in this thing no matter what. But it is nice to know that what we're doing is making a difference. At least I hope what we're doing is making a difference.
I will say this. That's not good. Chunks in the oil pan. That's not a good sign at all. Don't eat this stuff. It's not good for you.
There's that drive that goes up into that distributor-like assembly. All right, at this point, I think we've removed just about everything we can remove. So I'm going to set this thing down on the ground and get our new engine set up to pull out of its little home there. Well, we can get this on the ground and get those parts off that we know we got to get off anyway. Okay, we know we got to take the valve cover off. 10 millimeter. Another thing you can do in a situation like this is take pictures. That way you can, as you take things apart, if you take pictures, you've got a visual record. And sometimes that's a great tool to get a job like this done. Let's get this big old plate off of here. It looks like 4 fasteners, 13 millimeter. Now that we have that out of the way, it's going to be easy to do our double nut / stud removal technique. Looks like we got one more thing to remove. That's our trusty bracket we use to pull the engine with. It's a little bent. Doesn't concern me. It serves no other function than to get the engine in and out. At least no other function that I can tell. I believe we're pretty much picked clean. Let's do some cleaning up of those parts until I can figure out what's going on with the rest of it. Want to see what we can see real quick? Find out what's inside here. These are a 13-12 point on the connecting rod. Remember, I'm not the one that diagnosed this. This engine may have gotten hot, but I don't think it's blown. You can see the back sides. Maybe it was knocking. Maybe that's what the deal was, as it was knocking. After it got hot, it might have cooked it. You can see the inside of that bearing cap. It's not seized. Not happy, but not seized. In a situation like this, where this is being rebuilt, I'd rather just put these back on finger tight, because I know that the rebuild place is going to go through it anyway. This way they know that I was in here. Same thing, it doesn't look horrible. Yeah, I think this just cooked the rod bearings, really. The mains aren't looking too bad. And that's that. Okay, I have removed the oil filter from the side of the old engine block. By the looks of it, it has the same holes as what I have in the new block. It just doesn't have these threaded holes around the outside. That's kind of what threw me off. I was a little confused by that, but it appears that all we're going to have to do is swap out this threaded portion here into the new engine block, and all will be right with the world. So I was looking down inside of this, and there's a little bit of what looks like well, it almost looks like a torque spit kind of pattern. So I went and checked my tool arsenal here, and I found this T55, and it just happens to fit right in this. So this is threaded into the block. So in order to get it off, I'm going to use this T55 fitting, and hopefully it'll break it loose, and it did. So there we have it. It's this little threaded block, and you can see those marks down in there. Maybe it would have worked better for an Allen head, not real sure. But what I had was this T55 that seemed to work its way down in there just fine. So that's what I used. And we'll be able to screw this into the new block, and we'll be able to accept a new oil filter, and we'll move on with our lives. Now I'm going to clean up the valve cover first. This way I can cover up the top of the engine, keep any dirt or particulate matter out of there. But before I do that, I want to clean this up. Remember how we had like some special fasteners, like this stud that's stuck up on this? And I want to kind of keep track of where everything went. I'm just going to lay out my fasteners in such a way to where I can remember where they went. So this way, when I lay this thing back down like this, I can just slip everything back up into where it came from. Now you don't want to get rubber, or you don't want to hit any of this rubber up with parts cleaner, because it'll get really hard and brittle. And since this so easily came out, I'm pretty happy about that. I believe this might be the fresh air side of the PCV, I'm not real sure, but it just came right out, and I'm real happy about that. So I am going to pull this rubber gasket out. I'm hoping there's a new one in my kit. That's still fairly pliable, but still, we want to be thorough. And I'm just going to clean the valve cover, top and bottom, before I install it on the vehicle. Now I've got it cleaned out pretty good. It's not 100% spick and span, but I'm not really concerned about that. Because, well, let's face it, it's going to get dirty on the inside again anyway. Some of you might want to take this a bit farther. More power to you. I just don't feel like taking the time to get out every single bit of this. But now that we've cleaned it out, I'm going to go through and hit it with a little bit of compressed air to try and wash out the rest of any solvent that might be left over in here. As you can see, my gloves have suffered quite a bit from this little cleaning exercise. Let's dry this guy off and get it ready to install on the new engine. Okay, now that I've finished up with the parts washer, I'm just going to go through with a little bit of compressed air and just get rid of the rest of the solvent, or as much of it as I can. As long as we're cleaning stuff that goes back on the engine, let's talk about the other parts that we have. We have an oil pump here, and we have the oil pan itself. What I discovered was, in the box that came with the new engine, that was not a water pump that was in there, but instead a new oil pump. You know, honestly, I'm very happy to see it. So we're just going to install this new oil pump rather than trying to clean up and recondition our old one. However, you may notice that there's still the oil pump drive that needs to be swapped over from one to the other, as well as this fastener here. So I'm going to take the one fastener and just leave that over at the oil pump, but there's sort of a retainer here on this thing that makes it so that it's not necessarily wanting to come off or come out. Maybe if I wiggle it back and forth for a little bit. It looks like it's plastic, which makes me nervous and not want to hit on it. Because if I do start hitting on it, I could break the plastic and I'd lose the retainer. So I'm just going to try to work it back and forth until maybe it'll come out. It feels like it's moving a little when I do this. I'm just going to take this over to the vise and see if I can knock it out. There we go. Looks like we got it out of there okay. And it didn't seem to damage the plastic or anything at all. So we'll be able to transfer this over to the new pump. I don't really think I need to clean this drive up. I mean, come on, there's really nothing on it. So I'm just going to swap this over to the new pump. You might be able to see this new pump has like a little ridge here, probably just to accept this little plastic bit that I'm going to try and knock onto here. That looks like it got it. And that'll keep this drive from coming out of the oil pump. If that were to happen, it would be catastrophic. There'd be no oil pressure. After all that, I look in the oil pump box and I find a new one, but this one is split. And I don't know how I feel about that. I think I'm going to stick with my old one because that was actually part of that oil pump drive and it doesn't look like it's coming loose. So it did come with a new one, I guess, just in case, but the fact that it's split like this makes me a bit nervous. I suppose now we can turn our attention to this oil pan. We'll just save that oil pump for show and tell later. I'm going to start by removing these main bearing seals, I guess you could say. Well, I don't want to call them bearing seals because they're not bearing seals. It doesn't look like this had a gasket. It looks like it had the stuff, which is what I've seen for a lot of General Motors oil sealing capabilities, so that are just what they used to seal passages with. They just use goop. I suppose it works, and that's what we'll use going back on unless our kit comes with a new oil filter or oil pan gasket of some sort. It doesn't look factory to me to how this whole thing is set up. But we're going to come in here, I'm going to dump out the old oil, and we're going to try to make this better than the way we got it. Alright, you can see we've got some junk down in there, but we've also got this old gasket material that's all around the outside of this oil pan. So I'm going to start with the wire wheel here and just see what I can remove with that. And then afterwards we'll take it over to the parts washer, clean it out, and get it ready to install on the engine. We've got our mating surface all squared away. Now let's take it over to the parts washer and clean out all that gunk. I've spent a lot more time cleaning the inside of the pan than the outside of the pan, and I'm glad I did. I'm going to go through and I'm going to wipe it out because I want any of the oil that's in here just not contain any contaminants whatsoever. This way I don't have to worry about all that junk working its way into my new engine. We've cleaned this out, we've cleaned the mating surfaces for the gasket. I'm going to wipe it out, hit it with some compressed air to try to dry it out the rest of the way, and then we'll call it done. Get ready to bolt it back up to the engine. Okay, there's a little bit of just stuff, cleaner, left over in here. I'll wipe that out. See how nice and shiny and clean that is now? Very happy with the result. So now I have an oil pan that looks like it belongs on a new engine. I just want to make sure my gasket mating surface is free of any solvent, because the new gasket won't stick to the solvent. Now we have an oil pan that's ready to go on our engine, and I believe that concludes the prep work that we need to do. We need to start installing our old parts on our new engine so we can get this back in this truck, get this getting back down the road. All right, before we get back to this in earnest, let me get a look at what we got in our gasket kit, just to see what we have here. Looks like we've got most of the gaskets that we're gonna need. Looks like we have a new exhaust gasket, new intake gasket, oil pan, valve cover, timing cover. Goes to that little plate on the back of the cylinder head, might be EGR. This looks like water pump. I'm not sure where those O-rings go. They even gave us some sealant. More, these little O-rings. Those might be injector O-rings, not real sure. And a few other miscellaneous gaskets, including the front lip seal for our oil pan. So it looks like our oil pan gasket is a couple of pieces, and it's going to need some adhesive in between. New exhaust gasket, I'm happy to see that. Oh no, that's actually what looks like a front main seal for the timing cover. We do not have a new exhaust donut. That's disappointing, but I've still got my old one, so we should be okay with that. For the most part, looks like we got a fairly complete gasket kit here to work with. Well, as long as we're on the subject of gaskets, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adhese this one to the oil pan itself and just get it ready. It's not going to hurt anything for it to be stuck here. In fact, I actually think it'll help while I go and do other things with the engine as I assemble it. So I'm just going to lay it out to know which way it goes. I believe it goes on, well, I've got it backwards. Looks like it goes on this way, yep. All the holes and everything line up. So that's a good sign. So I know that my gasket adhesive is going to go two places. I'm going to put it on the pan, but I'm also going to put it on the gasket itself. And I'll lay my gasket on the cardboard. Got my gasket adhesive. Notice I'm not using RTV here. I will use RTV at the corners where this meets up with this. I don't have a problem with that. But what I do have a problem with is when you goop the crap out of a gasket with RTV, especially a cork one like this, it starts slip sliding all over the place, and that's not a good thing. What we want is we just want to tack the gasket in place till we get our fasteners in there, run our fasteners down to the proper torque, and the gasket should crush a little bit, seal oil, not leak a drop. That's what we're going for. I'm going to let that dry for a minute and sort of tack up. I'm also going to apply a little bit to the metal surface here that is now clean and dry. Now the gasket is adhesed to the pan. I'm just gonna let it sit here for a while. I've got an idea for this. Got these little clamps. Now this thing can sit and set up while I go and finish up with the rest of the assembly of the new engine.